So before we start with the next, the second of Ulrike's lecture, I just want to comment that the program that was posted outside the wall is not up to date. This is an old version, so I removed it. We're going to put a new one there. The thing is that Pikovsky, that was going to come and teach here, he had some last moment problems and he had to cancel. So we had to rearrange everything. And so in any case, we're going to post the new version on the wall, but it's always good to keep an eye on the website because there might be other problems during the weeks. Okay, so please, Ulrike, it's very nice to have you here. Let's go for the second of our lectures. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And so today we are going to continue where we left off yesterday. So I remember you, or I recall, so that what we are doing yesterday, we are looking at different critical transitions. But you might have noticed that most of these transitions were basically rather simple and in models which you can describe with ordinary differential equations. So we have a time evolution of certain states of the system, but most of it was basically described by ordinary differential equations. So now today I would like to come to more complex critical transitions, which we have to face when we are going to have systems which evolve not only in time, but also in space. And I'm very happy that one of the co-authors who is here is also present here in the audience. So because some of the work I'm showing here also to illustrate things have been done with a group in Brazil. And so I'm happy to have one of the representatives here now in the audience. Okay, so let's go and have first a general look at what are critical transitions in spatially extended systems, because this is what we are talking about today. And in principle, spatially extended systems we can look at from two different perspectives. On the one hand, we can think about them as being continuous in space. So then what you have as model systems are usually partial differential equations. And so many things have been done already in terms of reaction diffusion systems. And the most important transitions there are transitions to different patterns. So pattern formation is one of the main subjects when it comes to critical transitions in spatially extended systems. And then, so to say, we have basically different patterns which can appear. So you see that here, this is from a vegetation model, and this is really an experiment in Israel. And so this is a vegetation which grows with different levels of precipitation, and that means so you have a bare soil here, so there's no vegetation at all. What's on the ordinate here is the biomass in general, and then this is the precipitation. Here you would have a state where you have full vegetation cover, but what's in between are different patterns of vegetation, and they can be spot patterns or honeycomb patterns here, or we can have labyrinth patterns, everything you can really see in nature. So this is growing next to the Desert Institute, the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research at the, in the area of Negev. Okay, so this is what you get basically as the main transitions in spatially extended systems. And of course, you can think about here also of critical transitions. So a critical transition would then imply that you go from one pattern to another. So you can go from full vegetation to different patterns, and then this is done by front propagation. So fronts of vegetation can either, so to say, go towards vegetation, but it could also go the other way around, so that the desert is invading, and finally you end up with the final state, which would be the bare soil. But you can, of course, also have this front propagation between different patterns, so that on one side of the front you have one pattern, on the other side of the front you have another pattern. So this is one of the ideas how critical transitions would happen in such a spatially extended system. There is another one. So this is a local tipping. So locally you have a critical transition. And so this would mean that locally some parts of this pattern can disappear. So this is, for instance, here the disappearance of one of these spots, which you can really observe in nature, by the way. So all these kind of patterns you can see very nicely in semi-arid areas. So aerial pictures from Nigeria, or other places in Africa. So they show you lots of different vegetation patterns. And so here, one by one, so to say, your patterns would disappear. And there is a third mechanism we have to take into account, and these are front instabilities. So you have a front between, say, this would be the bare soil, this would be the vegetation. There is a front in between, but the front itself undergoes an instability and, for instance, so to say, develops these kind of fingers here, which would finally develop, and you end up with a completely different vegetation pattern. In this case, it would be a labyrinth pattern, what could happen. So all of this is related with pattern formation, and for all of these transitions, so there is one common property. And this common property is that these are gradual transitions. So that means what we were talking about yesterday. So we had critical transitions which were, so to say, considered to be rather abrupt transitions from one state to another. So when a critical threshold is, so to say, crossed. But here this is different. So here, these transitions happen, so to say, step by step, pattern by pattern, and this makes it gradual. The same we would see, so when you remember the first example I was discussing was the thermohaline ocean circulation, where we had looked at one model which was a conceptual model where we have really the switch off of the circulation, and then there was this breakdown of the circulation, and then the circulation is off. And then we had next to it another picture, so which was showing the whole thing also in terms of a global circulation model, so which is a spatially extended model, of course. Then you would see so that all these abrupt transitions, and there is only one, so to say, in the conceptual model, but in the general circulation models, there were several ones. And these several ones are exactly, so to say, manifestation of this gradual transition. Because so we had this example for the noise-induced transitions. We had the example of deep convection. And these are convection sites which are very local in the ocean. And if they are shut down, so then the overall circulation weakens. And this is what you would see in a climate model or in a global ocean circulation model, that this is gradual. So this is a very important property for critical transitions in space, that this type of tipping mechanisms are not as abrupt as we have seen them for differential equations. So since we are here, so to say, in a school where the main application is more or less in other fields, like in neuroscience, for instance, or in agent-based models, and all these kind of things. So therefore, I will not go into any more detail when we have a continuous space here. So we could discuss things, of course, in the hands-on sessions, but I would like to focus on the right side, because discrete space is also something which is very important. And so in many applications, and wherever you think about network structures, so this is a discrete space. Because what you have as a network is basically you have some nodes which could, of course, also be a meta-community model in ecology. So there you have patches of population which are interconnected with migration channels. But you can, as in neuroscience, you have areas of neurons, so to say, with maybe different functioning, different properties, and they are interconnected with each other. So different areas of the brain talk with each other, and this could be best represented as a network model. And therefore, I would like to go in this lecture only to the dynamics of networks, because this is what is in this audience here the most interesting point, so when we talk about critical transitions. And I would like to convince you here that also there gradual transitions occur. So that means this is not so simple as we have discussed yesterday. So because the most important transitions, so which we have in networks of oscillators, which come with power grids, so with food webs, so with neuron networks. So everything would be much more complex and will also lead to gradual transition. And this is what we would like to see. Now, yeah, okay. So let's have a look. So what kind of networks we could have in mind? So for this type of transitions, because we want to go now for synchronization and desynchronization. Our networks, as I already mentioned, can be anything like this, like a power grid, so which you see here, a meta-community, so which is basically a network of networks, because in each of these habitats you have another network of species interacting with each other, or we have the brain here, where you have different areas of neuronal activity which are interacting with each other, and therefore, so to say, you can also think about a network concept here. So when we think about a network consists, of course, of nodes, which are basically the representation of these kind of either patches of neurons, for instance, or areas of excitability in the brain, or it would be producers and consumers in a power grid, and so on. So you have these kind of things. And these networks are interconnected with links, and these links have a certain topology. And this topology is, of course, also important, which we have to take into account, and we have to discuss, so to say, transitions for different topologies. And on the other hand, you have also dynamics there. So the dynamics we had yesterday, so which we discussed having this kind of critical transitions, are of course also now there, but they are in one node. So this is the local dynamics. Local dynamics can be anything like stationary solutions, periodic solutions, chaotic solutions. So all this type of behavior, periodic, quasi-periodic, chaotic, everything can happen in the nodes. And then you have, so to say, due to the connections here, so we have a dynamics which we would like to study, which is basically due to the coupling, because now it becomes very important what the coupling is, and synchronization phenomena are very much related to changing the coupling. And these are synchronization and desynchronization transitions which I would like to discuss, because these are the most important ones which happen in many networks, and I would like to show you how complex these critical transitions are and what to expect. Of course, I cannot do it, so to say, in all the as a comprehensive view here. So because I know that there are lots of other talks on synchronization here, so therefore I have selected only a very few things I would like to talk about, because there will be general synchronization talks. However, since this is a school and I'm not familiar with all the background of the students, so therefore I have chosen at least to give you a short introduction to synchronization, just for those students who are maybe not in this field yet, so that you can follow and do not get lost, basically, so when you don't know what I'm talking about here. So synchronization is a very old phenomenon, And it has been first described by Christian Huygens, you see, so this is his drawing. So he looked at the synchronization of clocks which were hanging on a wooden beam here. So they are loosely connected, but connected. And this is in the 17th century. And he already, so to say, observed that coupling is something which leads to synchronization. What is synchronization? It's an adjustment, a mutual adjustment of rhythms. If you say it very general, so this is a mutual adjustment of rhythms when you have self-sustained oscillators. And this synchronization comes about that the coupling is the most important thing which mediates the synchronization. Without the coupling, they would not synchronize, but the coupling is very important. That means when we talk about synchronization in most of the pictures, so to say, then the coupling strength is the most important bifurcation parameter. So we have talked about bifurcations yesterday. And then when you think about networks and you think about synchronization phenomena, then you have basically the coupling, which is the most important parameter. So there are other examples here as well, so which I have already shown. Epileptic seizures will be one of the major topics also, particularly in the second week of this school. But so we see also nice experiments, so you can just go on some websites and see this moving, so that these metronomes will basically synchronize because they are connected with this beam here. And a very interesting biological phenomenon is the fireflies. They are looking for mating, and so they try to attract the mate, so the partner for reproduction. They try to attract with this little light here. But of course, so one firefly's light is not really visible. And what they do is they group together and fire synchronously. And this is what you see. So I was told it's a gorgeous thing to see this in the forest. So you can do this in America, for instance. So you can see this type of pictures. When they come together and emit the light synchronously, then so the attraction to the partners is much, much higher. So this is a mating strategy. And this is already something very interesting. Now, when we think about synchronization, then of course our oscillators we are thinking about can be different. So because we can have coupling of oscillators which are periodically moving, so that means we have a periodic behavior when they are uncoupled, or there could be chaotic behavior when they are uncoupled. And according to that, synchronization also happens in a different way. So because you can have either, so to say, an unidirectional coupling between the two oscillators, so that one is the driver and one is the response. So this is a very important thing to consider, because we have, for instance, in ecosystems, we have the seasonal cycle which drives this type of oscillators. So for instance, an ecosystem which is oscillating. And so you would have this type of coupling scheme here, but it could also happen in neurons. So you have a certain stimulus which gets, so to say, transferred into neuronal tissue, and then you would have again this situation. What is happening is an entrainment to the frequency of the driver, basically, so which is also called phase locking. And so you would have a mutual coupling, which is possible, so that you have two independent oscillators with different natural frequencies, and they interact with each other, and due to this interaction, they would finally oscillate with a common frequency, but so to say, depending on their coupling strength. So because you see a coupling from this direction to this, and from this direction to this, they don't have to have the same strength. If they are different, so to say, then so this will, of course, influence what the frequency, the common frequency, is going to be. But so to understand, so to say, what we are talking about, here is once again how an oscillation would look like. So because when you look at state space, then this is, so the state space is spanned by all the variables in your system. And then what you get when you have an oscillation, so this is just a closed curve. So this would be the closed curve. When you look at this as a time series, which would be here, so then you see, so to say, the phase of the oscillator here. So this is the angle, basically, where so of this oscillator. And then you have an amplitude here. The amplitude is constant. So to say, this would be your amplitude. And then you have here the phases of the oscillation. And for a linear oscillator, so who has studied physics knows that you can basically describe the whole thing as a sine function with a kind of phase shift. So that means you have your amplitude, you have your phase here, and this would be the natural frequency. And this is, so to say, related. So this frequency is related to the, so this is the rotational frequency, this would be the real frequency, and the period here. And we call this the natural frequency of the oscillator. Now, what is more important in this business, so when we come to neuronal networks, for instance, or many others, is that we are dealing with chaotic oscillators. So chaotic oscillators can also synchronize, but then we have different types of synchronization. And these different types are phase synchronization, so that the phases, so we have now learned what a phase is for the oscillator, so that the phases are bounded and they are, so to say, their difference is smaller than a constant. This would be phase synchronization. There could be lag synchronization, where amplitudes also play a role, so they are correlated, while in the phase synchronization, amplitudes are completely uncorrelated. And you can have complete synchronization, where phases and amplitudes are identical. Now let's have a look, so how it looks like. So these are the usual representations. So you have the two oscillators as a time series here, plotted on top of each other, and then, so to see here in this view graphs to the right, so we see it in a different representation, because you take two state variables, one from one oscillator and another one from the other oscillator, and plot them together. So you have a state space of two components. One is from one oscillator, the other from the other oscillator. And usually you take the same components. And then you can also distinguish the different synchronization states. Here there would be no synchronization. This looks completely erratic. So in phase synchronization, we see already something which looks like a common oscillation. But if you have a complete synchronization, so they are on top of each other, so the two time series, and when you plot it in this representation, they would be, so to say, the whole dynamics would be on the diagonal, because x1 equals x2 in this case. Now, this would be a representation of lag synchronization. So you see they have a certain distance, these two oscillators, in terms of their phase. And so amplitudes are correlated, but they are, of course, not identical. And we can see this type of transitions to synchronization. We can identify them by Lyapunov exponents. But I will not go much into detail about this now. So now, yeah, okay. So for complete synchronization of chaotic oscillators, I would like to bring you close, so to say, to a concept which is very useful in looking at synchronization phenomena. And we are going to use them, so to say, when we are discussing these transitions for synchronization and desynchronization, because we have already seen that in complete synchronization, the dynamics was taking place. If we go once back, no, we have to go two back. Yeah, here. So we see that the dynamics happens here on this diagonal. So when we look at so this once again, then we can make use of this idea. So this has not worked out, so then I will do it here. So then we can make use of this. We can make use of this idea so that or this observation that the thing here is on this diagonal and generalize it to a higher dimensional problem, because then this condition that things are synchronized completely means that the whole vector, so to say, on each of the models which are on the nodes are identical, and that means this is a manifold. It's a submanifold in state space, and this is called the synchronization manifold. The synchronization manifold here, in this case, it's just a diagonal, but in general, you would have a surface, so to say, a subsurface in state space. And what is good to do is basically when we have this identical dynamics, so we have really identical vectors, we can, first of all, consider them, so to say, with this kind of linear coupling. So then you see, so that if we are on the synchronization manifold, if the whole system is synchronized, then each of the system behaves like if there would be no coupling, because this coupling term here, because these vectors are identical, is vanishing. So that means once on the synchronization manifold, the oscillators do the same thing, so to say, as if they would be not coupled. And now we go to a new coordinate system. And this is also something which is very useful in looking at synchronization phenomena, because we can go to a new coordinate system by introducing an error variable. So that means this is the deviation from the synchronization manifold. So that means this is basically the difference of the two vectors, if we would have two oscillators coupled now. So then we have a deviation from the synchronization manifold. But this gives us, of course, only half of the variables. We need another half. And then the other one would be the mean value of the two oscillators. So, on the synchronization manifold, we have seen the dynamics is like if it would be a single oscillator. So this is a very useful concept, so that we have new coordinates which give us the errors. So how much do we deviate from the synchronization manifold? And we can also use all the quantities which one can compute, so to say, particularly Lyapunov exponents, which give us, so to say, a characteristics of the dynamics. We can compute them in this new space, and then we end up with Lyapunov exponents, which are either in the synchronization manifold or perpendicular to it. And this is also very useful in the characterization. So the transverse Lyapunov exponent, which, so to say, looks in the direction out of the synchronization manifold, has to be smaller than 0 for synchronization. Then you say that the synchronization manifold is transversally stable. So because trajectories which would be starting outside the synchronization manifold will be attracted to the synchronization manifold and then reach the attractor, and the error variables would be 0. So this is, so to say, the setting. So now we have basically everything what we know, we don't, what we need. So this is, so one more slide in terms of, so to say, basic concepts in synchronization. And since Arkady is not here, I stole his wonderful representation on Scholarpedia to show it here to you, because when we look at synchronization phenomena, and we are, so to say, interested mostly in the phases, not so much in the amplitudes, then we can also look at phase models, where the synchronization is only discussed in terms of the phases of the oscillators, not in terms of the amplitudes. And then you can see, so to say, how phases could behave. So they could be in phase. In synchronization, they could be antiphase. There is no synchronization here, and there is phase synchronization where they have this, the phases, the difference of the phases is smaller than a certain constant. So this is also a very valuable concept, and which is used in many different considerations of synchronization. And what I would like to bring across now is that I would like to discuss different types of critical transitions in networks. All of them are related to synchronization and desynchronization to highlight the complexity of these critical transitions, which are, so to say, which are popping up whenever you look at networks, so which undergo a critical transition. So, and what we have learned yesterday is that we are looking usually at perturbations. So, because one of the ideas to look at critical transitions is that you make a perturbation. It does not have to be small, as we yesterday also learned, because for the shock transitions, shock-induced transitions, we have a large perturbation, and then we look, so to say, what's happening. And so therefore, it can be all types of perturbations, and I will show you some of the transitions which definitely are the response to some perturbations which you apply to the network. And we are going to change frequencies of the oscillators. We are going to change state variables and see, so to say, desynchronization phenomena. But so we will also look at state-dependent vulnerability and finally at unpredictability, where after a perturbation, the system is going to go. Okay, so let's go and start, so to say, with having a closer look at the synchronization transition and discuss why, not always, but in many applications, so this is a gradual transition as well. Because what you see here now is the coupling strength, and there is a certain interval in which the coupling strength is changing, and in which, so to say, the transition from a non-synchronized state here to a synchronized state here takes place. So this is a gradual transition. It has some kind of a minimum epsilon where it starts, and then a maximum epsilon when everything is synchronized. And in this interval, so there will be a transition. Of course, there are other transitions which I'm not addressing here. So there is explosive synchronization, for instance, but I have seen there are other talks in this week about it, so I will not go into any detail of those. And what we think here is really, so to say, when you are strongly unsynchronized, so then the synchronization manifold is transversally unstable. So that means your trajectories are really, so to say, they have to escape from the synchronization manifold. But so then we are now going towards synchronization, but then, so to say, there are certain places where this synchronization manifold becomes attractive, and this gets more and more, so to say, until there is only very few places where, for instance, with periodic orbits embedded in an attractor, so that that you have places in the synchronization manifold which are still repelling. But finally, when you have the full synchronization, then you are on the synchronization manifold. And so then this is attractive, this manifold in the subspace. So in synchronization, you go this way. Desynchronization, you go that way. So you go again, so to say, out. And so this is what I would like to show also for neuronal networks, so that this is going to happen. But let me now go first to one very prominent model. So we just thought about phase oscillators. This is, I would say, the most prominent model for phase oscillators. So this is the Kuramoto model, so where we look at the phases, and so they might have different frequencies here, and they are coupled. So this would be the simplest network, and you measure, so to say, with this quantity, so which is basically the mean value of these angles here, the synchronization. And now let's see whether it works. So this would be unsynchronized. So these are the phases of different oscillators. They do whatever they like. So, but then they can also synchronize their phases, and then, so to say, they have a fixed relationship to their phase differences, but so they are all distributed for the 360 degrees. But if they are, so to say, in a stronger synchronization, so these are the frequencies are not the same, so therefore the phases cannot be, so the phase differences will not be zero, but nevertheless, so to say, they cluster there in a certain way. So this is a model which is very widely used in terms of describing synchronization phenomena. Why? Because this type of models, which give us the phase dynamics, are, of course, when we look at different networks, so not the Kuramoto models, then they have usually finite size effects. So that means you have a network, which has a finite size. You always have to show that if you increase the network, so does the behavior really persist or does it not? And so for this model, so you can go to the thermodynamic limit so that the number of oscillators is infinity. And this makes it, of course, very nice for theoretical considerations. So because this thermodynamic limit in the general case is not accessible. So for people who are really interested in, say, oscillators which are real neurons and which have a much more complicated dynamics because there are different variables describing gates, so gating variables for ion channels and the electric potential. So then these type of models are much more complicated, and then you forget about basically what you can say about the number of oscillators goes to infinity. So this is, in statistical physics, you are very much interested in this limit, but in practice, you can do it here, but mainly not for something else. No, so now we want to. Okay. So, and this brings me now to the first transition I would like to describe, which is the synchronization of a heterogeneous complex network of Kuramoto oscillators. And we would like to look at the synchronization transition in detail. So we take a network of oscillators with different topologies. So I have shown here for this talk only one topology. We have taken others as well. But so this is a small world network. And in a small world network, you start with a regular network, but then with a certain rewiring probability, you add long-range correlation, long-range connections, so that you have not only next neighbor coupling in, say, maybe a coupling neighborhood, but you have also long-range connections to other nodes in the network. And the synchronization transition, so to say, is usually something which, as I said already, is taking place so on a certain interval, and the synchronization, the fully synchronized state, because this is a heterogeneous network, so we come close to the one here, but not necessarily reach the one. And so we see here for different rewiring probabilities, we see the synchronization transition. So the coupling strength is increased, and what you should see is with increasing coupling strength, all these oscillators in the network start synchronizing. But so when we look carefully and look, so to say, at the quantity which gives us so the mean value of the Kuramoto parameters, so we would expect for full synchronization that this goes to 1. And if there's no synchronization, this should go to 0. So that means this is a quantity between 0 and 1. But then we see here for different rewiring probabilities, so a completely different behavior. So these are 4 different rewiring probabilities. Only the one here, so where we have a rewiring probability 1, which gives you a random network. And then, so we see, so to say, a rather smooth transition. But here, so So you see a mean value over different realizations, and then you see a lot of spread. So what are these realizations? So this is the important point now. So because why we see this type of picture? So because what we do is we take a network, we draw from a Gaussian distribution, we draw frequencies, put them on these oscillators. Remember, for the Kuramoto model, so this was the parameter describing, so to say, the natural frequency of each of the oscillators in the network. And then, so to say, we look at different either shuffles of these frequencies. So each realization is taking the same topology, the same frequencies, but we mix them up, so to say, in the distribution to the nodes. So this is the shuffling. Or we change only one. So we take one out of our nodes. So the node is still there, but it gets assigned another frequency. So only one is changed. And the behavior is almost the same, as you see, on the top and on the bottom. So we see this very high variability. And so this is called malleability because this is, so to say, the variation which we can observe for the specific route for a certain frequency distribution to phase synchronization. And this can, as you see, so to say, vary very largely, particularly for the green. So here, this is this green. And the purple, so this is the purple here. So a realization. That means we have a network where we have a certain amount of long-range couplings, and we see lots of fluctuations when it goes to synchrony. And these are resembling very much sample-to-sample fluctuations, which are known in phase transitions. In phase transitions, these kind of sample-to-sample fluctuations are well known. And so you would see them here, and signaling or manifesting, so to say, that the phase transition to phase synchronization is dependent, so to say, very strongly on the frequency distribution to your nodes. And particularly when you have a certain range of long-range couplings, because so when you have most of it long-range couplings, so that we are close to a complete random network, so to say, then you don't see that any further. So you see a very nice transition to phase synchronization. So what does it mean? Okay. So why is it so? So one factor which plays a role, but which is not decisive, is that we have also a high degree of multistability in this system. So if you would not change frequencies but initial conditions, so you would see also that you would see this high variability for the green and the purple stuff. And so we would see here, so this high malleability for exactly also for the transitions, but this time manifesting basically that so we have a high number of different realizations of attractors along the route to phase synchronization as we go, so to say, to the fully synchronized state. So, okay, so no, this is something which, no, wait a second, I'm missing, okay, yeah. Now this thing, I think I will leave it here, so because this is a lot more reliable. Okay, so now, so we have shown this on the left, so to say, changing the coupling strength. So because the coupling strength is the most important parameter here, but on the other hand, you would see the same also if you change topology. And topology you change when you are rewiring the probability, so you are changing the rewiring probability. You would again see, so to say, this huge spread of different realizations, so which we would take with the same probability, but then, so to say, having another realization of the network. And the largest changes of the global dynamics takes place in the neighborhood of the transition to synchronization. So this would be, so to say, the figure over there. So the pointer we can still use. So we would see it here. So the largest changes in this transition are really, so to say, when we are close to the transition to phase synchronization. So, and I was missing another slide. Yeah. So because so the forward doesn't work properly here. So because just to illustrate once again, what does it mean that we get such a huge variability here? So because this is basically the explanation what happens with this malleability. So we are changing one node and we are changing one frequency. And one of the realizations, we have changed maybe this node and this got a new frequency, then this is this realization. And then we change this node and then maybe this is the realization. And then we see, so to say, that the spread so the spread is the most important, so to say, ingredient here to show us how large this malleability is and how large we have this variability between the different paths. We see also that there is even, so to say, they are not even monotonic, so these paths. And what is happening is, of course, that we get very different spatial patterns. And these spatial patterns, so to say, are responsible for these different paths. Because now, so to say, we have the original, say, network, which we choose for the frequencies in the very beginning, so always for different rewiring probabilities. But then we change, so to say, one node here, and here also different nodes. And we see that the spatial distribution, so to say, which we get in dynamics of the different oscillators which are coupled is changing. And in principle, so to say, it is very easy to understand, because what is happening is, even though we touch only one node, we are changing basically the global dynamics, but we are also changing the whole network, because we have a network which has, so to say, long-range connections and short-range connections, and which node we are taking out and putting another frequency on is changing globally, so to say, what frequency is there at with which connections. Yes? So the frequency, which is the natural frequency of this node. So you have the Kuramoto model. So this is, so to say, the time evolution of these phases. And then there is this omega I, so which is the frequency. And this is what you change. Yeah. Yeah, and then we take one out. Yeah, we change just one. And it's set to one particular value. You can get the same thing if you just exchange two frequencies, because then you have always the same values even. You get the same, or you shuffle all frequencies and you get the same. So it's a very robust phenomenon. But it's a perturbation. If you change only one, it's very small, and still you get to many different attractors. Yeah? So the coupling strength is, of course, the bifurcation parameter. So that means, in terms of, let me see, let's go back, and I better do it this way. So the coupling strength is the coupling strength is much stronger than the frequencies. So because the frequencies are, I don't have the Gaussian distribution here, but it's it's smaller than the coupling strength. So the coupling strength is only changed after we have changed the frequency. So the frequency change happens at the very beginning of the path, and then we just look at changing the coupling strength. So these are two different things which are not happening, so to say, in parallel, but so sequentially, because we have basically, so we compare different networks with the same topology, same frequencies, except for one, in the very beginning, and then we look at the path to phase synchronization. This is all what is it about, so to say. This would be the procedure, how to do it, and then, so to say, this is what we see.
Sorry, could you find any relationship between the malleability and I know that these models of network is relatively homogeneous, but any relation of the distance of the different trajectories of the different variability that you observe with any topological properties of the node that you select?
No. So the answer is no. So I have not included this figure, so it's in the paper. So at least we couldn't find it, say. So we tried to find this relationship because we had exactly the same idea. There should be some relationship. We could not unravel this relationship. So maybe there is one which we haven't seen. Yeah. Yeah, so this result, so the question was just for everybody who has maybe not understood it acoustically. So, so this is so the small world network, but we have also used distance-dependent networks, for instance, where the malleability is also there, but, for instance, no multistability. Therefore, we know, for instance, that multistability is fine. It adds to the malleability, so if we have multistability also, but it's not a necessary condition, for instance, because we have also looked at other networks, yes. Yeah. Yeah, but so this is just, let me see whether this works from here. No, of course not. Just a moment. So, of course, so this numbering is arbitrary. You are completely correct. So, but you have to somehow find a way to visualize, so to say, what is the overall, say, because you have a spatial pattern, each of your nodes has a certain dynamics, and these nodes are now numbered here, so to say, these are 501 nodes, so you see them, and so you can compare which node has which, so to say, dynamics at each time step, because this is time, so on the x-axis is time, on the ordinate it's the phase for each of the oscillators, but to get the spatial pattern, what you have. So this is what you have to find a way. And of course, it would look different if I number the nodes differently, so which of course I'm free to do, but you would still see that there are differences, and you see, of course, also that these are the green lines here. I did not mention that, but the green lines are the Kuramoto parameter, so, and they are all characterized by a different Kuramoto parameter, and in addition, you have the Kuramoto parameter is a mean value. That means that even if you have the same Kuramoto parameter, you have a different spatial distribution. So this comes in addition, so because in principle the Kuramoto parameter is not the best way to measure this. So, all questions clear? Okay, so then, Okay, so now, so we have looked at one transition to synchronization. Now we would like to have a look at a transition to desynchronization. And so I would like to show you, so to say, another gradual transition, and which is also quite interesting and which is not well known to many people in the network community. So, because it has been studied, so to say, so in nonlinear dynamics a long time ago, but so now I would like to shed some light on it, how desynchronization really happens from a dynamical systems point of view. So because the idea is the following, so that if you have a synchronized state and you would like to go to desynchronization, so what you have to do is basically, so you start with a synchronization manifold, which is attracting, so all the trajectories are going there and making, so to say, the dynamics in the synchronization manifold. You have to go to something, so where the synchronization manifold is not attracting, is repelling, and so your trajectories are going out. But this doesn't happen, so to say, at once. And so why I can show you? Because what happens, and I mentioned that already here, so when we go back once, so we are going now from here to here, and then in this sketch, so to say, you see here some dot. This is a periodic orbit, so which is embedded maybe in the chaotic attractor, which is in the synchronization manifold. And this periodic orbit loses transverse stability, so therefore we needed this concept of transverse stability. So it becomes transversally unstable, but it's only one orbit. And the rest, so to say, is still attracting. And this thing has pre-images, if you look at this. And so these are, so to say, the pre-images here, and these are the tongues, the escaping regions where the trajectory can leave. But since the synchronization manifold is still attracting, so it leaves for a while, it's a transient only, but then it comes back. It comes back, and this is, so to say, so it's like when you blow bubble gum, so therefore it's called also the bubbling transition. So there is a trajectory which is going out, so because there are these unstable periodic orbits, and if your trajectory comes close to it, it's ejected from the synchronization manifold. It's going around, but it's coming back at some other point where the synchronization manifold is attracted again. So therefore, the beginning, if you like, of desynchronization would be such a bubbling transition where only parts of your synchronization manifold become unstable, so where the trajectory can go out, but this is a transient behavior. But this can happen. And it can happen in neuronal models. So this is now an example which I would like to show. These are two Fitzhugh-Nagumo equations. So they are coupled, and they are coupled with two delay couplings, so which have different strengths. So we have the two neuron models here, the simplified, so to say, Fitzhugh-Nagumo model. So this is the one here. And then we have two delay couplings, so which are happening here. And now let's have a look how this happens. So how in such a model would it look like? If we have only a single delay, so we cut the second one. So we have, for different delay times, we have two different behaviors. So one is in the synchronization manifold. So this is this kind of mixed mode oscillation. So you have small oscillations here, and then you have these big excursions. And here, so to say, the synchronization manifold is transversally stable. So you would see it in the synchronization manifold. But then for another delay time, so you see something else. So you see a chaotic dynamics, not a mixed mode oscillation. Looks similar as we see. But now the synchronization manifold is transversely unstable. So that means your trajectory, so to say, is getting out of the synchronization manifold, is developing, so to say, here some some dynamics, comes close to the synchronization manifold, but since this is transversally unstable, it never locks into it. So, okay, so now let's see the whole transition. So because there is in between, so to say, when we are increasing one of the coupling strengths, so we have in principle 3 windows when we have the 2 delays all together. So what we saw previously was only this one on the left side, this one on the right side, which also occurs already when I have only 1 delay coupling. But if I have a second delay coupling, a new dynamics pops up. And here we have both types. So we have this blue trajectory, so which is close to the synchronization manifold, and we have the other one which goes out of the synchronization manifold, which is, so to say, manifesting transverse instability. And so now how does this dynamics really look like? And can we describe it? So we have the dynamics here once again, but here, so to say, is the explanation as a scheme. So what really happens in this case? So we start from here with increasing the coupling strength, but then we have our mixed mode oscillations in the synchronization manifold. The synchronization manifold, this is this S here. So here's our mixed mode oscillation. This is transversely stable. Everything is attracted by the synchronization manifold. Then there comes the bubbling transition. So the bubbling transition makes it possible that one of the unstable periodic orbits is unstable, it goes out, and then there is this large amplitude out of phase dynamics, the red one, so to say, which is unstable. This is a saddle. So this is unstable, so therefore it will be ejected from this object along its unstable manifold, and then it goes back to the synchronization manifold and is again going to the attractor, because the attractor in the synchronization manifold is still transversally stable. But then, so to say, here, everything is transversally unstable, so even though we see that there are remnants of stability, but the trajectory will never reach the chaotic saddle, which is in the synchronization manifold. This guy is now unstable, which was the attractor, is now unstable, and everything is outside the synchronization manifold because this is now the attractor, which was previously the saddle. And this is called a blowout bifurcation. And in a blowout bifurcation, so you have, so to say, the transition from having a transversally stable synchronization manifold to a transversally unstable manifold. Yeah. Oh, 2 questions. Yeah?
When it goes out of the synchronization manifold, it seems like it's following the same path every time. So is it a transition to desynchronization, or is it a transition to a generalized synchronization rather than?
No, it's not it goes along the same path, and I will show you why. So because this is exactly on this figure, so maybe we postpone this question, and if it's not clear, then we discuss it once again. We come to your question later. Just a moment. I want to discuss it first. So because the way in this model, so in other models this happens differently. So, but this is a particular intermittency process, what we see. So because we go in to, so close to the synchronization manifold, we go here with this periodic orbit also. It goes basically, so this is not even a periodic orbit, so this is just we go to a fixed point here, so which is a saddle point in the synchronization manifold. Then the saddle point has complex eigenvalues, so that means in the synchronization manifold, so the trajectory spirals out, comes to a periodic orbit, and along the periodic orbit it is ejected again. So the way is always the same, because there are only a few invariant sets, and in the first place, so to say, it's one invariant set, which becomes transversally unstable. So that means if the trajectory, and in a chaotic in a chaotic system, you come close to every point, so to say, with a certain probability. And then, so to say, but you will definitely go there. And then your trajectory is ejected if you are in the neighborhood of this transversally unstable invariant set, which is embedded in the chaotic attractor in the synchronization manifold. And then you go out, and then you come back at another point. So there are other intermittency processes where you can go back to the same one, which is not the case here in this example, but so there are other examples too. And here it goes out, so to say, when we reach the blue one here, so we go here and then we go out again. So, and this would be always, so to say, the same thing if you are at the very beginning of the bubbling transition, because there you have, in general, only one invariant set which loses transverse stability. Okay, next question. This is a good question. So this is, yeah. The question was whether one can see this transition in any dimension. Of course, since we have delay differential equations, so this is an infinite dimensional system, in fact. So, but I have seen the same kind of transition, and this is, so this is even the way how we came to it, because I had Sebastian Wieczorek as a guest in my group, and we showed him these things. And then he said, oh, we have seen the same thing in a laser system. Look. And so this is also not a high-dimensional system in this sense, but so this is a general transition, so which happens in different models. But as we have delays and even 2 delays, so this is in principle an infinite dimensional system. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very good question. I repeat it also for everybody else. So the question was whether, so to say, it happens in one node and then it spreads over the network. So this question, from this investigation, I cannot answer this question because these are only 2 nodes. So we are in a 4-dimensional space, even though so we have this delay coupling. So for a higher dimensional system, I would guess, but this is a guess, so I don't know, so that certain nodes will be the first ones to do this, to undergo this type of transition. And then others will follow. Maybe this is a spread. So it's a kind of cascading. But this is not for sure. So this is just a speculation, I have to say. So because we never looked at this in higher dimensions. So I mean in a huge network. But this is what I would expect so to have. But then, of course, so to say, the very different couplings so which you have, and the topologies will also have a share in changing, so to say, the real nature of this transition. But in principle, so to say, what I would expect is that you see these type of things.
So do you think that this is going to be like, for instance, in the old models of Caneva, let's say, the old models when you have global coupling, global coupling, and then you have, for instance, when you have only one state, 2 states, or different clusters, you will have intermittency. I mean, and in those, so it will be different nodes cluster energy, and they change the phase. So the state. So do you think you could expect something like that? Do you? I mean, you have in mind those papers I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but so I think it's now too much speculation. I would not, because these are highly nonlinear systems, And even one delay is terrible to handle. 2 delays is even worse. And if you have a network, so then it becomes much more complicated, because then also the degree of influences from outside play a role. I would not dare to speculate. So what is really the outcome? So how does it manifest in a higher dimensional system? But of course, you see this type of behaviors also in other systems, which makes it very general. But I'm not aware of any example where you see it in partial differential equations. So because this would be, of course, an equivalent we could think about. So I haven't seen anything like this there. But I think it's a very interesting question, how far it extends really to higher dimensional problems. Yeah. Yeah, the role of the second delay is really to make, so to say, these 2 bifurcations. They are not there. So in the one delay case. So because there you see, so to say, not clearly a bubbling and blowout bifurcation, because there you see only, so to say, the transition from being in the synchronization manifold to go out, but without these two bifurcations, which I think are necessary. So this is the ingredient. And to be honest, we have not studied the single delay case enough, because our original goal with this work was something completely different, because we were looking at the formation of extreme events in neuron systems. And so this is what it came about finally. So, but it was originally not our goal, so therefore we did not go into detail in these transitions. But this came, so to say, later, so when we understood what this type of transition is. Yes, there's another question.
In the phase space, how do you ensure that it is the true embedding and not just an projection of really embedded?
I think I have not understood the question.
When you construct the phase space to compute your
Yeah?
you are assuming that this is the true embedding.
We don't have an embedding here. So if you are thinking about time series and doing an embedding technique to get the dynamics, this is not the case here. We have a clear model. So this is just, so to say, the state variables, what you see. So the context of the delay is that you have a transmission, so to say, from one node to another one, so which happens with a certain time delay. So that means, so to say, what is the impact of the other node is coming in to the node under consideration with a certain time delay. This is. You could think of something like probably the best way to explain it simple is if we would do it in a population dynamical system, and we would have animals, so which are migrating. So then they need a while, so to go through the channel. So because they have to walk it basically, and so this could of course give you a time delay. So what concentration is on the other habitat. So the impact on this habitat is going to happen with a certain time delay, because it takes a while for the animals to move. And in a neuron system, it takes a while. Even there, the whiles are pretty short, but there is, of course, a signal speed. So how electrical fields or electrical signals or chemical signals are transferred in the brain. Yeah. So, all questions done? I'm already worried about the whole thing, but okay, let's see how far do we get. Or maybe we do the other one, so because I'm doing the hands-on session today, so what we could do, of course, is that we are not going to the whole talk now, so because I'm already seeing that So due to the many questions, I think this is good that we have these many questions. So, but so that we really understand what it is all about. But I'm afraid we are not getting through the program. But then my suggestion would be that I would use the first part of the session this afternoon to go through the rest of the talk, because I think it doesn't make sense now to just rush through it in high speed and nobody understands what's going on. So this is maybe something to think about. So, okay, so we are now, so to say, so we have now, once again, a look at this figure, because this is what it was really showing. So because here the synchronization manifold is transversally stable. One of them gets transversally unstable here, one periodic orbit, or another invariant set which is embedded in the chaotic attractor. One gets transversally unstable, and then several parts get transversally unstable, and then, so to say, the whole synchronization manifold is transversally unstable and is repelling all the trajectories. And this is how it would look like. Okay, so now this would be, of course, a good time to break. So, should we do that? Is the question. Now we are, of course, ahead of time, 15 minutes. I could, no, I will probably, yeah, I could probably explain the first thing, but there is a lot of also things which I have to explain before we start being in the desynchronization process. I don't think I can make it in 10 minutes. I think it's better to shift. Yeah, so if you have questions, yeah, we can fill the time also with questions. If you still have questions, and then we would have the second part, so to say, so in the afternoon session, because I was not aware that there will be so many questions in between, but this is fine. I think this is totally what a school is about, because we want to learn something, and then, of course, questions are very welcome. So, now, more of them. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we start with a regular network. 500 nodes, yes. Once again. What is the average degree? No, I think it was even next neighbor coupling. Yeah. So it was even a ring, yes. Yeah. This is a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Yeah, but I think in the limit where you connect everyone, then it's fully connected, and of course it breaks down, right?
Yeah, but then you have a random network. So if you're having p equals 1, so then it's not fully connected. Not necessarily.
But in this case, if your starting lattice is only next nearest or only nearest neighbors, then you have to be very careful to maintain a single connected component. Because then when you make the rewiring, then you can break.
You can break the network.
That's it, because it's very...
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. So this is a good point, but I think we have added them.
As a condition for the rewiring.
Yeah.
Just keeping as the single connected component. Okay.
I think yes, but I have to check it once again. This is a very good point. Yeah. Yeah, I can handle this. So I'm running back and forth anyway. So
my questions are a bit more naive. You know, but sometimes you're mentioning, no, like ecosystems or animals, no,
yeah.
as your examples, as your motivations for studying this oscillator dynamics. But then you have to tell me what will be the coupling in those cases. I mean, what is the type of interaction that you will have in between animals? I mean, how do you guarantee that this coupling is going to be the parameter epsilon that you have there, that it is constant?
Yeah,
because
this
I mean,
is a very
they
good
move
point.
around,
Yeah,
even if
yeah,
it's,
this
there
is a very good
vision,
point.
I mean,
Of course, in ecology, this is the usual way how to do it.
I know, but
So since so this has developed, so to say, in the past. There are much better animal movement models now, so which we are not using here. So we are using, so to say, a diffusion term, so to say, for the migration, so that it's proportional to the gradient of population abundances in different habitats. So this is the simplest thing you can think of. And this is what most of the theoretical ecologists do.
so you think now that in the case that you have this diffusion of species in between the different patches that you were introducing, so diffusion is enough always to guarantee that you are going to have synchronized dynamics?
So it's not always that you get the synchronized dynamics. Of course not. So because you see also in population dynamical systems, so you see certain patterns of populations pop up. So it's not necessarily so that you see the same thing. And we were also already looking into questions how synchronization is impaired, for instance, when you have different mobilities, so to say, between the patches. So for instance, from one patch to the other, maybe, so it's more difficult to go, so therefore the speed is much slower than going back and so on. And then you see that there are new phenomena pop up, so which are really related with this type of movement. Since we mostly work in marine systems, so then this is also one thing what I should mention here. So because population dynamical systems are usually working with abundances. These are densities.
I know.
So, okay, so for a marine system, this is perfectly fine. So because you have lots of single individuals in, say, a volume. So you can work with a density. I would not dare to model elephants like this.
Yeah.
So because these are single individuals, and then this type of ecological modeling, which is very common in ecology to model with densities, is very questionable from my point of view, because, first of all, the number of individuals not enough to make it a density, and second, so to say, so this particular movement behaviors play a real role. And people who are, so the good ecologists, I would say, in terrestrial ecology, they would use completely different movement models, and they would use also individual-based models, so more the agent-based models which you use, which I think are much more appropriate when it comes to terrestrial ecosystems. In marine systems, this is fine. So because you have the mixing of the ocean, and that means you have a well-mixed system, and then diffusion is fine, even though this is even not true. So because now diffusion ansatz is something which is isotropic. But if you are in the ocean, this is not isotropic because you have so to say, flows. So you have ocean flows which have certain directions. And that means there is a flow pattern, a large-scale flow pattern, which is much more important. And this is also almost never addressed in ecological modeling. So most of the people really work with this type of diffusion ansatz, which also for the marine systems is, from my point of view, questionable, because there is a lot of unidirectional coupling because there is a flow from one island to another. And this is what you have to take into account. But this is rarely done. So.
Thank you.
There is another question. So, yeah, I was running away.
Can you please calm down?
No. So you should wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I want to know if I get the time story of two oscillation, the time story. and I see that the oscillations are not synchronized. There is a technique to know how to choose the value of epsilon. I want to know if I get the two time stories and I plot it, and I see the difference between the two oscillations. There is a technique to know how to choose the value of epsilon.
To get them synchronized. But this is a time series problem, I would say. So because usually we work with models, so there you don't have this problem, I would say. So because, so there you choose your parameters to see, so to say, so what are the main parameters which determine the amplitude, the frequency of your oscillation, and so therefore it's all at your hand by modeling certain processes which give you these oscillations. If you have no idea, if you have a time series, so to say, and you have an oscillation, so you can plot this, so you can see how far, or is there any type of, so if you would take these plots, which I have shown, where you plot, so to say, one oscillator versus the other one, so then you can maybe guess a little bit. So from these type of plots, whether there is some synchronization between the two. And there might be even, so to say, sophisticated methods how to do this, but since we are not working with time series, so I refer to the time series analysis crowd here. So this is still arriving, I think. So therefore, there might be something, so looking at time series is always good, but it's not sufficient at all.
Okay.
All right.
I have one question. A quick question.
Another question. Who
I have a
is-
question.
So where is the quick question?
Yeah.
Okay.
About the bubbling transition.
Yeah.
This jump, can you measure it? I mean, like the amplitude?
This is a good question. I don't know. So, I mean, in the model you can, of course, so because you see the error variable.
Yeah.
So because if you do it in this type of coordinate system, where you transfer everything to error variables, so which are the transverse deviations from the synchronization manifold, then of course you can see the larger the error, the higher is your amplitude, how far you go away. So the error variable would tell you this immediately. So when you measure this in this coordinate system. But you can also do it after the simulation, so when you have all the variables and you can compute it still, so to say, the deviation from the synchronization manifold. So this is doable. If you can see it really in a measurement, I mean in an experiment, I have no idea. So this is a very good question. So if one could realize somehow, so to say, this type of error function, so already in the experiment, or build it in as a kind of post-processing of the data you measure, you should be able to do it.
Sure. And do you think it's related to like the model itself?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure. I would say what's the height, this is definitely model specific and system specific also. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
For sure.
Thank you.
More questions? Well, if not, we continue in the afternoon. Okay. Thank you very much.